Let's go ahead and get things kicked off this morning. I'd like to welcome everyone that joined us today for Prometis Partners Fireside Chats. This is the second in a series of 5. We hold these every single month for business owners to help you better understand some of the things that you need to do and think about to not only sustain and grow your business, but certainly if exiting your business is on your agenda, which it usually is for most business owners at some point, then you can start to think a little bit more about some of the strategies as you kind of move through the process that you need to think through. So here at Prometis Partners, we like to make sure that we're educating business owners, obviously, on the different things that they need to do. We like to say that we help you build value through making better decisions. So we're very fortunate this morning to have with us from I'm really going to brutalize this, Ken, is from Worcester, Mass. is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to kind of shorten it up a little bit.
That's fine.
Close enough. So I've known Ken for a few years, and he has just done a dynamic job serving in several roles in businesses, both as treasurer, CFO, CEO. He's actually had his own businesses for turnaround companies, and actually implemented and started back in 2010 the corporate value metrics. And so today, what we are going to be talking about is what we define as the 8 key value drivers that really help a business to elevate and grow the value of your business. So Ken, thanks for really being here today and part of this discussion.
Sure, my pleasure, Vince. It's my favorite topic, as you know, so I'm always ready, willing, and able to participate.
Yes, thank you for that. So let me kind of just help the group that's listening here today. Down at the bottom of your screen, there is a chat box that I'm looking at. So if you have some questions along the way, please feel free to type in a question in the chat box, and we'll make sure that it gets addressed, and we'll kind of go through it. So we've got a full schedule today of some topics going through all 8 key categories, and we're going to try to condense it down to give everybody a general idea of what they look like. So let me talk about what they are first. They're planning and leadership, sales and marketing, people and operations, and finance and legal. So what I thought I would do today, just to kind of keep the topics flowing smoothly, is I'll break them down into brackets of 2. Certainly you can ask questions about them as we go through the program, but I thought we could spend a few minutes on a couple of them and then just kind of move on to the next one. So let's go ahead and start with planning and leadership, but let's just kind of talk, first of all, Ken, a little bit about the 8 key drivers of growing your value, right? Which I kind of define these as intangible assets, but they're kind of a little bit of a mix, especially when you get into the finance piece of it. But in your view, Ken, and with your opinions and experiences, how do you see business owners really approaching growing the value of their business?
Yeah, it's a great first question, Vince. And first of all, good morning, everyone. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for having me here, Vince. So yeah, most business owners we find are constantly being told by their advisors, and certainly if they're trying to exit their company, they're being told this by business brokers or investment bankers, whomever they're dealing with, to grow sales and profitability. And that's pretty much the direction that they're given. Get as big and profitable as you can, and when you hit a certain threshold, we can take you to market and get a certain sort of multiple on your EBITDA or earnings, depending on your industry. And it's amazing to me, having spent 18 years turning around distressed companies, how much trouble that direction can get companies into, because they end up a lot of times, if they're really good at growing sales in a strategic manner and they're good sales, they tend to grow faster than their organizations can support. And I wrote an article about, now it's probably been 12, 13 years ago, that's still very appropriate today. It was entitled Growing for Broke. And it was all about companies that grow so fast that they basically implode. And a lot of those kind of companies became my turnaround clients over the years, because they were so focused on sales and profitability that they were afraid to invest in their organizations for fear that that would chew up their profitability, and for fear that their sales wouldn't necessarily materialize in time to fill the capacity, or fill the organization if they're building the organization. Nothing could really be further from the truth. It's all about balance in a company, and unless you have the balance in all of those 8 functional categories that you rattled off, there's a higher likelihood that the company will become distressed, or certainly underperform in the future. And in any weakness in any of those 8 functional categories, those are constraints to growth and to value creation. And if companies continue to try to grow without alleviating those constraints, like anything else, eventually they could become fail points and cause the company to fall into distress. So on the other hand, if companies, even if they are investing in their organizations and they just want to grow sales and profitability, they often, without being strong in planning and leadership, they often will end up chasing sales that are outside of their core competency, maybe outside of their geographic region, maybe they're bigger contracts than what they typically take on, maybe they're underpricing them in order to win more business, all because they've been given some direction to just get as big and profitable as you can. And what they don't realize about those types of sales, that if they're not sustainable and recurring and strategic in their plans, those types of sales, although they may provide cash flow to the company, they do not, or may not, create value. So in a sale transaction at some point in the future, those sales and the profitability associated with them could be drastically discounted by any buyer, because it's just not strategic growth or business.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that, Ken. Yeah, it's really, it surprises us also when companies are taking a look at where they are, and I think that plays into some of our first couple of topics, right? I know you know this, but strategic planning is probably, in my view anyway, really the foundation of every single business, of where it's going to go, and the strategic plan of that business, and how it's communicated to, if there is a leadership team, or at least the main people in the business, and then communicated out to the workforce within the company. It is very critical, because as we see in our walkings, a lot of companies really do not utilize the strategic plan, or the planning piece of it, to help them make decisions and move forward. And they're not really including the leadership team in many cases in that process. So in your travels, as you've seen them, Ken, how have you seen those two? And you can break them up if you like. How have you really seen those two? And let's kind of use just a couple of cases: work to a disadvantage and work to an advantage. If a business owner is looking at it, how do you look at a strategic plan, and what does planning really do for the business? And then kind of like the second question is really, how do we really incorporate more leadership inside of that decision making?
Yeah. Well, what you say is so true about companies not planning properly. And again, they end up chasing results, and they're trying to drive directly toward results, instead of letting the results be just that, be results of a proper planning process, and having the right leadership team in all of the functional areas fully developed and balanced with each other. I totally agree with you that strategic planning in a company is the single most important place for a company to start the process of creating value, often being able to double or triple their value over 3 to 5 years, and to prepare the company, whether they want to run it for the next 30 years and just be the highest, most efficient, most profitable, healthy company possible, or if they have an exit or transaction on their horizon at some point, to be ready for that transaction. And planning, in order to be effective, it has to be developed with input from the full leadership team or management team of the company. It can't be something that's just dictated by the owner or the CEO, because it's just their plan, and they don't have buy-in from the management team. They really need a team effort to develop the plan, get the buy-in of the management team, and then let the management team sort of push that down through the organization to their respective teams and below, all the way down, so that ultimately everybody in the company understands the plan of the company. And at a granular level, even lower level employees can understand how they fit and where they fit and what contribution they're making to the company reaching its overall plan at the top. And that's when you get full engagement of the organization, and that's where you get the best results, when it's done at a high level by the management team and then pushed down into more granular levels that are actionable, executable, where you have accountability and focus and discipline and all of that. So that's the power of strategic planning. It can really, done properly, it can really transform companies in major ways. You can do it in small steps, so it's not like you have to take the company and stand it on its head, which some people try to do when they advise companies. We just say, look, have a well-developed plan, start off with small steps, and then as time goes on, people get comfortable doing that, you can take on bigger and bigger bites. As far as the leadership team goes, we try to make sure that companies are cognizant of the stage that the company is in. Is this a steady state company? Is it growing rapidly or in kind of hyper growth mode? Or is it stuck in neutral or declining because of market conditions or the economy or problems the company is having, whatever? There are different stages the company is going through. Are they trying to make an acquisition? Are they trying to exit? Those are kind of the 5 stages. And the leadership team, in the leadership team, you need to have people who are experienced not only in their functional areas, but also in the stage that the company is at. And it doesn't mean you should get rid of people or get rid of them if they're missing one or the other of those. It just means that you have to be aware and be prepared to support the team with additional resources or expertise for wherever the weaknesses might be, just to make sure that you have a fully functional team that can navigate through the challenges of the particular stage that the company is in. And they're very different. The challenges of hypergrowth versus steady state versus decline versus acquisition or exit, all very different sets of challenges.
Yeah, that's some great feedback. It's interesting because, the leadership team plays such a huge part in moving a company forward. And it doesn't mean you're always, this isn't always about, going from 5 to 50 million or 10 to 100 million, right? This could just be, hey, we want to stay at 10, maybe we want to grow to 12 or 13 million. We certainly want to learn to be more efficient. We want to learn to be more profitable. And maybe it's just the owner trying to dial down his or her time involved so that they have a little bit more free time to do some other things that are a priority in their life. I really see that leadership team as probably one of the key cogs to move this thing forward, and I think that's right. Is, it is from the owner's perspective, really helping them, the leadership team, understand and giving them the tools to educate themselves and grow, right? I know we've talked before, Ken, about a lot of things. I refer everything to college football because I'm a huge college football fan. And I won't say what school, but they are in Ann Arbor. But at the end of the day, you see a lot of transition in college football. And you see a lot more today with the transfer portal being opened up for kids that get recruited and then they feel like they're not playing, so they're going to go to another school. So the team is moving around and the leadership team is moving around. So then the planning is obviously has to always be adjusted. But you always see kind of like the leaders within the team continue to rise to the occasion because they're getting better educated, better fit. And in a business sense, you really kind of have to do the same thing, right? Is as a leader, you have to take ownership of your own destiny to a certain extent, right? And understand really the department or division that you're operating, communicating to your manager, which is going to be communicating to the people in that division or department as to how do you really communicate with yourselves and with other divisions or departments. Do you see a lot of challenges in that area of leadership and kind of how a business really needs to drive that forward?
Yeah, so many great topics or issues and ideas that you raised with that commentary, Vince. I think of leadership kind of in three ways. One is the sort of the formal leadership team that's recognized by the company as the leadership team. And what experience and expertise do they have in their functional areas and in the stage of the company? And how can the company best support them through continued education or training or additional resources? So that's one aspect. And yes, as leadership teams kind of ebb and flow, as people come and go and get replaced and so forth, and not every leadership team, in fact, most leadership teams do not stay as sort of comprised as they are for a long period of time. Usually within a year or two of a team being together, somebody leaves or flushes out or can't make the cut or what have you, and you end up bolstering the team or bringing in new people and so forth. So you always have kind of a cultural evolution to the leadership team as well, to make sure that the communication and the interaction among the team is all coming together. But the other two ways that I think about leadership are equally as important, I think. And one of them is, especially for companies that are aspiring to a lot of growth, may not be quite necessary for a steady state company, as you describe, a 10 million company that just wants to eventually get to 12. But for companies that aspire to more rapid growth, an outside independent advisory board, not necessarily a board of directors that has authority over, governing transactions, but just an advisory board can make a huge difference to the owner and CEO and the leadership team, especially if you have a balanced advisory board that can provide some mentorship to the leadership team, especially where there might be some gaps. And I've seen advisory boards make a huge impact, helping companies to navigate the challenges of the stage that they're in when their management teams don't have that expertise. So that's a second way I think about leadership. And the third way is going sort of the other direction, down deeper into the company, because leadership doesn't necessarily have to mean that somebody has a leadership title or a leadership position in the company. Leadership can be an attitude or a set of behaviors or personality. Somebody that's anywhere in the company, even at the lowest levels, somebody can be a leader within their sort of circle in the company. They can have the right attitude, the right drive, the right ideas. They can be looking for ways to improve. They can, there are lots of things that leaders can do even at lower levels. They're developing their skills or developing leaders for the future. And I think it's important for companies to recognize those people, find them, and they are there, and they can make a huge difference. Find them and leverage their leadership skills to sort of help with communication and development at all levels in the company. So that's kind of how I think of the three levels of leadership.
Yeah, sure, great. Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it. Let's kind of move on to a couple more of the key value drivers, which is sales and marketing. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've had a tremendous amount of experience in here. So for those listening, sales and marketing are two different drivers that have to communicate with each other. Certainly you have the sales and the sales team, and who are they selling to and what are their KPIs to keep things moving. And then you have certainly the marketing team that is developing what is the marketing strategy for the company to get things out. So marketing strategies can serve as several different modes of marketing and how you're getting out there and where you're getting your business clients from. Ken, let's talk a little bit about where you see businesses really kind of missing their opportunities with really sales and marketing, because those are really key, obviously, to move the business forward. And you always have to have your company, growing at some point, even at a modest level, where your clients can some drop off. How do you replace them? What's your capacity? So where do you kind of see some of the missed opportunities inside businesses from both a sales and a marketing perspective?
Yeah, great question. And the answer somewhat applies to the other functional areas that we'll get to as well. And what I see very often in companies is a disconnection among the various functional areas. So sales and marketing, maybe they're working closely with each other, maybe not. Maybe the sales team is doing its own thing and the marketing team is doing its own thing. But or maybe they're working a little bit closer together, but typically they're not working in a way that is necessarily aligned with the overall strategic plan of the company. And that's why in your first question in this session, we talked about the importance of the overall strategic planning process, because that kind of sets the table, sets the direction for all of the other functional areas in the company to build out their own respective little mini strategic plans that remain fully aligned with the overall plan. And it allows them, when you have an overall plan, it allows the functional areas like sales and marketing to connect with other functional areas and with the overall plan, so the whole company stays in unison and kind of works together. Otherwise, you get people and departments, with the best of intentions. Usually, everybody's trying to do a good job, but they don't have the direction, they don't have the alignment, they're not sure necessarily what business is good business to go after. The marketing team might not really understand what the right messaging should be, what the right cadence of communications should be, what kind of a pipeline they should be building for the sales team to then take over and qualify and close. And it's just this disconnected set of functions. And you end up with sometimes really good people that don't really do a very good job, because they don't have the direction from the top. They haven't been part of it. They haven't bought into the overall plan because they weren't part of putting it together. And you end up with a company I see all the time, sort of a disjointed set of people all doing their own thing and not having the overall impact that the company is looking for.
Yeah, great points. Some of the other things that we see also that I'm sure that you have seen is, what is the budget for the marketing? And if you let's just say they're going to be going into 5 or 6 different areas for marketing, what's the budget for each one? Because they may feel, well, we might have more impact here or less impact here, and really starting to, moderate and track where the business is coming from, so that they know how to spend money more wisely, from year to year, and kind of set that budget themselves so they kind of know in direction. And then one of the other things is really the compensation and accountability of salespeople, right? Of like, what are you doing? Are you just giving them a salary? So now they become unmotivated, because it's like, whether they sell something or not, they're still getting paid. So are they doing a small draw plus commission? Are they doing a bonus? What key performance indicators do they have? Things of that nature. How many sales calls do they need to make in a week or in a month? And how many new versus existing do they make, and all that kind of good stuff. So I think a lot of this all comes together. And again, just as a reminder for everybody here listening today, this is really for you, the business owner. There is a chat box down at the bottom of the Zoom meeting. So please continue to put your questions in there. They'll show up on my chat box. We'll make sure that we get them out and ask Ken those questions, because this is for you to learn and to understand, and certainly get some information to help you plan certainly for your business on the direction that you want to go. So, those are some of the things. Obviously, Ken, those are some great points that you made, from the sales. I'm sure we could talk about it for an hour, but we're going to use the time to just kind of go through all 8 of them so that people get a really good idea of how these two connect, and towards the end, kind of how we kind of score them, right? And how the continuity between those is really going to be critical. So let's move on a little bit to people and operations. Two more additional key drivers inside of a business, which would be operations of the company, and then certainly the people that are within the company. This isn't the leadership team, but it could be part, but it's really the people within the company.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what you see from an operations in the people within inside of the businesses that you've run across.
Yeah, sure. So when we talk about people, we're kind of talking about the system of people within a company, and what systems and processes does the company have in place for recruiting, hiring, training, incentivizing, compensating, motivating, communicating with them, and so forth. So it's all of those systematic kind of processes that can build great organizations or not. And I think way too often, companies don't really know the kind of employees that they're trying to hire. They think that somebody that's a marketing person is a marketing person is a marketing person, and if they're good, then they can fit in any kind of culture or any kind of stage or any kind of industry and so forth. And in effect, when a company goes through the overall strategic planning and decides what kind of culture and personality they want to have in their company, that can really drive a lot of the systems that they build and the people that they recruit in the future. So just as an example, take 3 companies. Take a Google, a Federal Express, and a Nordstrom's, say, and think about the cultures of those companies and the types of employees that those companies hire. They all have the same or similar kinds of positions in their company to a large degree. They all have the functional areas that every company needs. But are the personalities and skill sets of somebody that Google would hire the same as the personalities and skill sets that FedEx would hire or that Nordstrom's would hire? They're very different kind of personality sets, even though the knowledge that those people have might be the same. So companies very often just make poor choices in the way that they recruit and hire and train and compensate people. And I think, again, everything kind of springs from that overall strategic planning process that sets the direction and the culture and the communication and all that, and everything else, all of the other functional areas flow from that and stay aligned with it, and really help to build this sort of multi-layered filter system for decision making in the company. And when they go to build their people systems and hire the right kinds of people, they have to pass their decisions through this multi-layered filter system to sort of make sure that they're making the right decisions. And in operations, it's the same kind of process. These are operating systems. And what's their plan? What is the plan for the operations? How do they want the operations to grow and develop? Do they want to have operations in the future all in one location? Do they want to expand locations? If it's a capital intensive company, will they be needing new equipment to gain efficiencies, to remain competitive? At what point of their growth might they need those things? And of course, then they'll have to connect with the finance function and make sure they're all aligned and so forth. But in operations, it's all about what do they need today to support their level of business? What kind of systems do they need? What kind of processes do they need? What kind of training do they need? And then how will their operations grow and develop as the company's top line grows and develops? Will they outsource more of their operations? Will they vertically integrate more of their operations? these are all conscious decisions that can be thought through and decided sort of, years in advance of the needs arising, not on the fly as the company suddenly finds itself in a, facing a constraint and they need to solve it instantly. So the more the companies can plan, the better visibility they have as to the challenges that they're facing, and the better solutions that they can develop way in advance.
Yeah, I think that that's really great. In talking to business owners, especially when we take a look at the people, right? And we all know that today it's really hard to recruit people. Everybody is at a shortage of people wanting to work for various reasons that are out there. And so it's really critical, I think, to have a strategy for how you're going to hire. And the one thing that we've really kind of looked at is really kind of a message that we want to send to businesses to have them implement, which is called employee branding. And what is that employee's experience, and how do you get them in, right? So we talk about, you have to attract and recruit the top talent. You have to pick the stars from the people that you have. You have to onboard them and, affirm the decision that you brought them on, engage them, certainly build any of their strengths that they have. What's their performance, their key performance indicators? How do you develop them over time? And then what's kind of their exit at a period of time? Because every employee has to go out, right? And I think it helps to build some purpose, some branding and culture when the company itself has a process that when you bring the employee on, whoever that is, whether it's a non-manager, whether it's a manager, or it's somebody that's going to be a key person kind of on the leadership team, is you kind of want them to make sure that when they go home that first day, that from the time they leave the doors of that business, in their mind, they're thinking, wow, I've really made the right decision here. And this is a really great company. Because it's a lot more than just the pay. It could be the benefits, it could be the flexible time they have, it could be the continued education that they provide for their employees to help them get better. And so we just like to see a lot of that to help them move forward, because whether it's today's market or as we go into the future, as we move further away from the COVID and some of the economic conditions that we have today kind of flip around, where you do have people wanting to actually work, is you still have to always recruit the top talent and get the right people in there, right?
Yeah, no, those are all great points. And communication, the communication system is a whole nother element to the people function in the company. And I think that's another area that often breaks down, especially in companies that are evolving quickly, whether they're growing, rapidly, or just changing their market positioning or whatnot. The more that companies can communicate directly with their employees about where they're going, how they want to get there, what they need from their employees, how their employees fit into their overall plan, and how they're contributing, and get feedback and input from their employees. A lot of times the best answers or the best recommendations for improvements come from the lowest levels in a company, and companies need to be open to the kind of the input and the energy that even their lowest level employees can provide. And the more that there's a kind of a two-way communication going on, where the leadership team or the CEO goes kind of right down to the bottom levels of the company and communicates directly, and then let the bottom layers sort of bubble up their ideas and input and energy and everything to drive the plan, the overall plan from the bottom up. You get a lot more engagement that way, and much better results. But communication is a key, and when it breaks down or it doesn't exist, which is the case in a lot of companies, you get misalignment and dysfunction. People, everybody, again, doing what they think is the best thing for them to do on any given day, but often going in different directions in ways that are at a minimum inconsistent with the overall plan, and in worst case, sometimes even detrimental to the company reaching its overall plan. not in a conscious way, just because they don't know what they should be doing, and so they do whatever they think they should do.
Yeah, and it's certainly the impact of that with the people is going to, move over into the operation of how the processes and procedures are really going to be executed or not executed to its fullest capacity. And are you really getting the most out of both of those particular areas? And it's a great, certainly look at your companies. If you start to have a lot of high turnover, there might be a pretty good indication that maybe the onboarding system is not working the way you like. Maybe the vetting system of your interviewing needs to be a little bit differently. And certainly once you get them in there, it's really about making them feel part of the team and helping them understand what some of their expectations are and their deliverables are, because both of those are, so intimately connected with each other, right? That it makes it really challenging for the business to really move forward to its level without having that great connection. And we're going to talk a little bit before we end this conversation. For those that are listening today, we're going to talk about how you bring this all together and how you as a business owner can really help yourselves in a sense and help your company have a really good understanding of having what we call continuity. And you hear that word a lot, but continuity and collaboration are two really key words. We have a lot of baby boomers that are owning businesses that want to grow and sustain them over time, and may need those businesses as income, or maybe sell them out to capitalize on their equity. And making sure you have these things aligned is really, really going to really help you kind of move that through. So with that said, let's just kind of move over to the finance and legal. I know, Ken, you probably have a whole lot on the finance side that you've seen inside of businesses over time, and also really from the legal side. People kind of think, what on earth would I really need from a legal side? If you have a partner or whatever, you have somewhat of a, some type of a buy-sell agreement that you have put together. Maybe it's been on the shelf collecting some dust for the last 15 or 20 years or longer. And how does that all work? But let's talk a little bit about some of the financing side and the legal side, and kind of what you've seen in businesses, and where they've also had some opportunities that they've kind of let move, and what could really help them.
Sure. On the finance side, so again, I go back to alignment as a starting point, and making sure that each functional area, including the finance and legal areas in companies, whether they're outsourcing the expertise for those areas, or they have the in-house capabilities, that the issues are the same. They need to make sure that the company, everything that those functional areas are doing are properly aligned and consistent with the overall company plan. And in the finance area, so you want to think about, the things, systems and processes. Again, is the finance area delivering what the company needs in terms of generating information, closing monthly financials, just all the basic blocking and tackling items that virtually every accounting and finance area pretty much knows how to do, or should know how to do. Close the monthly financials, create budgets and projections and forecasts, manage the cash flow and the banking relationships, put together any financing needs that the company has. One big, I think, area of mistake or lack of education that corporate controllers and even many CFOs make when they're planning for the financing of companies going forward is they don't understand kind of the right capital structure that the company should have. There's an optimal capital structure for every company. Capital structure is just the blend of debt and equity that's in a company that finances the operations. And too many times it ends up being a capital structure by accident. It's just whatever source of capital the CFO or controller happens to be able to find in the easiest way, that's what they go after. And very often that's debt, maybe bank debt, maybe mezzanine debt, or equipment loans or things like that. And that can get companies into trouble, especially if there are interruptions in the company's business plan, because debt is a form of leverage, of course, and cash flows have to support it. Well, if there's any interruption in cash flows, the debt service requirements don't go away. So I think that's one area to pay attention to, especially for growing companies, is how do you plan to finance that growth? Certainly, if you ever plan to make an acquisition, how do you plan to finance that acquisition? How do you plan to integrate the acquisition in terms of systems and culture and customers and all that? So that's a whole nother kind of topic that the finance area, if the company has those aspirations, the finance area needs to be doing a lot of that planning. Finance area is serving the leadership team. Every functional area is serving all of the other functional areas. So the finance team is serving the overall management team and serving the other functional areas by generating the reports and KPIs and information that everybody needs to make day-to-day decisions. On the other hand, the other functional areas are serving the finance area by providing the information that is necessary, by providing the operating or marketing information or organizational information that the finance area needs to do its job. So all of these functional areas are interdependent. And when you have really strong interdependencies and balanced areas, that's when the company gets to be at its peak performance. So those are kind of some of the issues that the finance area has to have in place. Of course, you need people who are capable and competent in their roles and so forth. One area that a lot of companies, I think, get confused by is the difference between CFO and corporate controller. That may be a whole nother conversation on the side as well. But I think too often CFOs are just they're elevated from lower levels of sort of, maybe they were an accounting manager, maybe they were a supervisor, maybe they became assistant controller, then controller, and then they moved up to CFO. Well, the CFO rank is a very different level. It's a very different set of skill sets and education than controller or all the positions below controller. And a lot of times companies don't understand the difference, and they end up putting people in CFO roles who don't really have the expertise or the skill sets to properly fulfill those roles. So I think that's one area where companies should be careful when they're hiring or when they're promoting people, to make sure they understand the difference in the roles and the difference in the skill sets needed. On the legal side, so many issues that I think are like landmines that are out there that companies don't pay attention to until they have a problem. And sometimes the problems can be severe. So just in terms of basic blocking and tackling, things like getting a qualified person to read contracts. Owners and often CFOs or COOs, they think that they can just read supplier contracts or customer contracts and just kind of wing it because it looks fine. We really want the business, or we really want this relationship. It seems fine. Nothing in here sticks out to me. We'll sign it and go, and we'll deal with any issues if anything comes up. But we trust these people, so I'm sure it's fine. Well, there are a lot of landmines buried in contracts. Even things sometimes where suppliers or customers will say, by signing this, you agree to our terms and conditions. And oh, by the way, our terms and conditions are listed on our website. And so you're signing off on terms and conditions that aren't even in the papered contract or the electronic contract. You have to go somewhere else. And if you sign, you're bound. And so there are landmines like that I think a lot of owners, and I've seen owners get in trouble, even in things like they're shipping across the, shipping, say, from Asia over to the US. And at what point does the company take ownership of the goods or materials that are being shipped? Is it the shipping point? Is it the destination point? That's a huge difference in risk of loss for a company. So a lot of issues like that, protecting intellectual property. A lot of times I ask a company, what sorts of intellectual property do you have? And they say, oh, we don't have any. Well, do you have a website? Do you have a domain name? Do you have a trademark? Do you have a logo to your company? Do you have a customer list that's proprietary? Do you have any secret sauce in your processes? Do you have, what's your, you know, there are lots of types of intellectual property that companies should be thinking about protecting, not only patents, which is, when you say intellectual property, usually they only think of patents. There are lots of other types, and there are different ways of protecting them if you know how. And they're often very simple and not costly to do. Non-disclosure agreements, non-solicitation agreements for your employees to sign, things just lots of different easy ways to protect yourselves if you pay attention to that. Also, just in terms of things as simple as the choice of entity. And if you have different elements in your business, do you make sure that from a legal and from a tax standpoint, so this is sort of a finance and legal issue, do you have the right entities set up to protect the assets of the company? I see companies sometimes that are, they own the real estate in which the company operates, but they own the real estate in the same entity as they own the operations. It's all lumped into one entity. And often they own the real estate outright, but they're putting that asset totally at risk of an accident happening in the operations of the company, because if they get sued for any reason, that becomes an asset that is available to the plaintiffs. So there are, you know, just making sure from a tax standpoint and from a legal protection of assets standpoint, get the legal advice that you need. Companies, I understand companies often don't want to pay legal fees because you don't want to pay $500 an hour just for somebody to pick up the phone and you ask a question. But very often you can manage those relationships so it doesn't become a super expensive source of guidance, and it can really be a saving grace for the company to protect against sometimes really catastrophic legal issues if you're left exposed. So it's attention to the issues, recognizing that these are key functional areas, recognizing that it's part of the cost of doing business to have really balanced, well developed functions and expertise in these areas, and making the investment to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Really appreciate that. You know, there's so much to this for those that are listening here today. I think the information that Ken has shared, I think, has just really been, you know, priceless, and really can help a business owner have a better idea of the things that they can continue to focus on, or if they haven't done so, learn to take a look at what these things are. So Ken, when we take a look at these things, I know you and I have worked together on these things over a period of time, right? So for those listening, there's really a way to score yourself on all 8 of these key value drivers. And one of the things that we do certainly at Prometis Partners is when working with you as the owner and the leadership team, is to help you kind of grade yourself or score yourself and kind of find out where you are from, let's just say 0 to 100 in these categories. And you know, you're probably doing pretty well in a number of them, but there's probably a few of them that, you know, maybe you're not doing really well in them. Ken, let's talk a little bit about the continuity of these drivers, right? When you kind of see them in a scoring kind of like report card, right? Mm-hmm. The importance of having continuity with all 8 of these key drivers and how that really impacts a business and its day-to-day functions, but its drive and its sustainability and ability to grow.
Sure, it's kind of amazing what we see kind of almost across the board, and we've had hundreds of companies go through that kind of grading process over the last several years. And what we find most often, almost always, in fact, is that of those 8 functional areas, the drivers that you described, planning, leadership, sales, marketing, people, operations, finance, and legal, companies are typically strongest in the categories that reflect the background of the owner or CEO. And so if the CEO comes from, say, an engineering background, typically the company will be strong or strongest in operations and finance and maybe legal. They're strongest in the kind of the compliance areas because that's the nature of their expertise and so forth. But they may be weak. The company may be weakest in the areas that represent kind of the natural opposites of that engineering compliant type of personality. So they're probably weakest in sales and marketing and people because those are areas that are outside of their normal comfort zone. And what they don't realize is the weaker areas, again, are the constraints the company has to growth. And in order for the company to successfully continue to grow, they need to push themselves outside of their comfort zone and bring those weaker areas up to be on par with the strongest areas. Then the company can grow more aggressively because they have a balanced organization that has the same kind of throughput capacity across the whole company. So, and then over time, so usually we say, hey, the first year, let's just try to get those weaker areas up to be in balance. And then in subsequent years, you can kind of continue to evolve and improve all of the categories together in an even manner. What's also interesting, though, is initially when we find out where the strongest categories are and we ask the owner where they are investing their time and energy and money to grow the company, it's funny how many times they're continuing to invest until we push them outside of their comfort zone. They're continuing to invest in the areas where the company is already strongest. See it all the time. Company is strongest in operations, really weak in sales and marketing, and they continue to invest in efficiencies in the operations area, new equipment, new capacity. It's not gaining them one dime of incremental value in the company or really incremental capacity because they don't have the organizational structure in place to support it, even if they can get the extra business. And typically, if they're not investing in that case in sales and marketing, they're not going to fill the extra capacity or take advantage of the efficiencies anyway. So we try to make sure companies are aware of that. Every company has blind spots, and that's part of the job, is to sort of shine a light on those blind spots and call attention and sort of have a call to invest more time and energy in strengthening those weaker areas.
Yeah, very well said, Ken. I mean, I think it's it's important to help business owners, have a clear picture of how well balanced out they really are in the areas and really do some fine tuning. So these aren't really, I think, as you said at the very beginning of our conversation here, is this isn't about flipping the company upside down. It's really more about, simplifying it, but is really taking a look at the areas like, how do you sharpen that saw every single day, every week, every month, every quarter and every year. And you really start taking bits and pieces of every little thing that may not be functioning at maybe the level that you like it at, and getting it just a little bit better. And then from that perspective, you get it maybe to just a little bit better after that. And so you just really kind of have to chip away at these things over a period of time. And what you do find, though, is you find that as you start to do them, as your company really starts to function a lot better, your people are a lot more aligned and working together and communicating. And naturally and organically, the company is going to have some opportunities to continue to move in the direction that you want it to move in. And really excel, just depending on whatever your objectives are. But we've got just a couple more minutes here. So again, if you have any additional questions, certainly feel free to continue to put them into the chat box, and we'll send them over to Ken before we wrap it up here. Ken, it really boils down to me, is really a lot of this, if not all of it, is really driven from the strategic plan and how are we as business owners really making decisions, and how are we including that leadership team to make those decisions, right? So whether it's from the vision or the mission statement or the objectives and the strategies, and what tactics do you have to implement that. So it doesn't really matter what size your company is, or where you want to go. Having those strategic plans and having those abilities to help you make decisions over a period of time is going to make sure you don't have too much debt at the company, or what kind of debt do we really want to take, or how are we really going to finance that that acquisition if we choose to do so, or what's our budget in the marketing department and things of that nature, right? It's the foundation to make sure that everything is right, and to make sure you have that in place, and that you're updating it on a regular basis, is really important, right?
Absolutely. I think so many companies view strategic planning as somewhat of an academic exercise, something that they can kind of whip through once a year at the end of the year. And they think just maybe creating a budget for the following year is strategic planning. That's way down. That's an operational plan, 1-year operational plan that doesn't have any of the higher level strategic elements to it. There was some research that came out several years ago that indicated that companies with a really clear vision of where they were going and how they were going to get there, so i.e. a really solid strategic plan, tend to be about 70% more successful than companies without that kind of clarity. So when you think about strategic planning done well, it really creates clarity and discipline and focus and visibility for where the company is headed, and what you need to get there, how you'll go about it, how everybody in the company will contribute, and how everybody will stay aligned and focused, so you're not just wasting a lot of time and energy and effort. It really gets the company, everybody rowing in the same direction, and you get a lot more leverage on the efforts of all the people in the company to move you down the path. So it's just an enormously impactful and transformative process when companies undertake it and stick with it and do it well.
Thanks, Ken. Really appreciate that. So again, thank you all for being here today. Hopefully that you've got some really great information. Ken, thank you so much for sharing your time with everybody today, and taking on the questions that we have, and sharing some of your experiences that you've had today. If you have any other questions about the topic we talked to today, certainly you can email myself or give us a call, and go to our website and shoot us over an email. We'd be happy to get you any information that you would like to have. Again, Ken, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time. And for those that attend, I hope that you have a great day. And thanks so much. Everybody have a wonderful week. Have a great day now. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Bye now.